All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Lee of the editor group, and today I'm going to be talking about data for design decisions. Um, it's funny because I actually pulled up this diagram from me like many years ago, so it's kind of funny. I wanted to find this diagram because I wanted to talk about when to use data in the sense of like quantitative data and like what questions it actually helps to answer. We're very familiar with problem and solution validation questions about like why, like how people use it, trying to figure out what's missing or where the gaps are. But on the flip side of that, there's one area that I haven't got a huge chance to use a lot until maybe a couple months ago, and that's the quantitative side, and that's looking at the volume of things being used, what's being clicked on, which pages are being viewed, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. Kind of my mini journey using some of these tools here at GitLab. So in the world of GitLab, problem and solution validation, like I said, is more on the qualitative side, where the quantitative side is actually where we're looking at iteration, where we're shipping something and then monitoring it or taking a look at the feedback from the stats from events and other things like that. So how is data being captured right now at GitLab? If you go into our documentation, you can see, you can find this diagram here of how data is being captured. All I was exposed to was sisense dashboards. So that's all I really knew. And I was just trying to make queries from there. I didn't know that there was a whole system behind this of how this actually worked. And for me, what was really helpful to understand was kind of simplifying this diagram into looking at something like this, where we have our data infrastructure layer, which is sisense, and that's a third-party tool that you may be familiar with by looking at charts or tables of data in the handbook or your product metrics. And that's where all the data gets aggregated to, and people can do queries and things like that on it. How it gets there is quite interesting. Snowplow is a system that tracks browser events as well as on the server side, some Rails events are being tracked through there as well. And that's fed into the database, and the database is where we store our information and things like that. And that information is also available in sisense, but more commonly, that information is aggregated into something called usage ping, and this gives you like a high level count of stats that you may care about. So it could be like how many merge comments are there on merge requests is a type of usage ping metric that that is commonly quoted. Essentially thinking about like aggregation. And what we can see with the pink lines is that with our SaaS service, we get like direct feeds from Snowplow, usage ping, and the database straight to sisense. But in the self-managed instance, it's just usage pings. And for that, there's a delay on the amount of data, plus like not everyone has usage ping turned on for security purposes, so they might turn it off or whatever. So that's kind of how we get our understanding of what we're actually looking at when we're in sisense. Like I said, this is kind of my mental model. The database is all the things that you can store and save that lives there. Usage ping lives is derived from any information from the database. So it's aggregation, so total number of issues, count of distinct users creating issues, any kind of settings aggregation, like how many sites have this thing turned on. That's kind of where usage ping excels at. And then on the other side, we have Snowplow, and that gives us structured events. So like, for example, if registration completed, and that's a backend event, that gets registered through Snowplow. on the browser, if you're clicking on a menu item or things or a button, then that could be triggered through Snowplow or captured through Snowplow, I meant. And page views as well within the product is tracked through Snowplow. So now I'll just go through a recent example or story of how I've used data here recently. So we had this left sidebar interaction, and at the moment we have the ability to both click on the parent menu item to go to the page, but we also have the ability to hover on the parent menu item, which opens up a submenu, and you can click on that to go through. This is a behavior that's been around since I've joined GitLab, and is actually like way back to 2017 when it was first introduced. And it's basically how people interact with GitLab now. And as we're looking through this interaction, we kind of wanted to see if it was an opportunity to potentially change it or remove it. But before we wanted to do that, I wanted to see like what the breakdown was between like how many people actually click on the first menu item versus the parent menu item, and does this behavior differ when it's collapsed or expanded? Because this feature was introduced for speed and efficiency for users who use like mouse as their pointing device. So if we take a step back, we're looking at click events here, and for click events, there's a certain way we define these events, and that's called the schema. And it's broken down to a structured event, and out of the box with Snowplow, they give you some default context. So this is the browser, the OS, and things like that. And then the data team has added on GitLab information like the environment and project ID and namespace. What we as designers and product people, what we care about is more in the structured event. So this is where we're going to put down what the name will be, what the label will be, and any properties, whether it could be a Boolean, whether something's on or off, or a numerical value or a string to determine what the state of something is. So to view what kind of events we already have in GitLab, what I've used was the Snowplow Debugger tool for Chrome-based browsers. And what you can do here is turn it on and go into the inspect view. And once you're in there, you can see the different events that are being shown here. So this example here is showing a structured event, and you can dig and see what's being captured already, and like what kind of information or the structure that we're already providing, or like what kind of information you already have, so that when you go to define your metric or how you want to track, you already have a baseline or a guideline of where and that are being tracked and the naming conventions of those. But I'm skipping that for the purposes of this showcase. What we did was then kind of broke it down between myself, the engineer in my group, Fran, and members of the data team to understand, okay, these are the different states that we want to capture. These are the different events that are being populated. And this is the extra information that we wanted to capture things to say, yeah, the person clicked it on the menu while it was in a flyout state, or they clicked on the sub menu item. So these different combinations were discussed amongst the three of us, as well as the PM. So it was a good story of a collaboration here, because for us, it was the first time diving deep into Snowplow events. So it was a good learning experience for our group as well. And once that was done, we gathered all the information, and I used sisense to create tables of getting information. And now we have the ability to look at the clicks what we were able to do was then compare direct clicks on the parent menu item versus the first submenu item when it was expanded. And we can see that when expanded, the parent menu item actually got more clicks, direct clicks, versus the first submenu item when the flyout menu was displayed. And whether people used the nested view, so that's when you can see the submenu within the left sidebar, or the flyout state, that was actually kind of similar in count. And some of us can come now to say, but why? And we probably have some assumptions here about, maybe that's the only way to interact with our menu, and there's no other way, hence the numbers are like that. Just one moment. Yeah. Right. Right. And so we go back to this. It's like out of doing all that data investigation, we got some answers, but at the same time, we also got more questions about like, why is this happening like this? What's what could be the root cause of this? And this is where we kind of look back at a qualitative side. And this whole balance of qualitative and quantitative is where I like to see us grow more as a design organization. There's a huge opportunity for this where we can use both to balance each other. Over time, when you don't do any user research, you kind of go 100% gut. And over time, you start introducing user research and you kind of balance out that with data. And sometimes you think that data will solve all problems. And I think this is where craft and experience comes into play, and you kind of balance that with data to make the right decisions over the long term. So where I see my kind of thinking around data right now is that it's both qualitative and quantitative, where one feeds questions into the other and the other feeds questions into the other. And it's just an endless cycle of iteration and validation. And fun fact, while I was doing this, I realized that my manager told me that designers are actually not supposed to have access to sisense yet. So that might get revoked for me soon. But for those interested in learning more about data, and myself as well, these are some useful resources to look at in the near term. Data for product managers. It's a page in the handbook that kind of breaks down understanding how our data works and like what kind of things those are useful to learn. And in the meantime, I'm working on a page in the handbook about data for designers. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments in that space, feel free to leave a comment. It's still early days there, so I'll ping you all once it's more refined. Thank you.
This is amazing. Thanks so much for sharing, Michael. That really inspired me to follow a similar process with my PM and try it out, because we're currently in the process of instrumenting the pipeline authoring onboarding workflow. And so I think it's perfect timing for us to start thinking like, what are we going to do next, and what data, what else is available. So it's been largely led by product on my team. So now I kind of feel more empowered to also get involved, seeing that it's not that difficult.
Yes, I think there's a lot of resources out there to get up to speed. There's training and certificates that you can try. So these are like one-page or handbook pages that kind of gives you like a high level of how to write queries and things like that. So you read some of that and fill out like the quiz, and then yeah, it's little things you can do like that to improve your skills there.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I'll voice my FYI, my comment. So Michael mentioned that, yeah, not everyone will get access to sisense. So if you need to create dashboards, make sure you reach out to someone that has editor access. That's usually product managers, as far as I know. I don't have access myself. And Marcel, do you want to voice your comment here as well?
Yeah, very small addition. But we also have a very strong data team that's already in place. They are small, so sometimes you may need to wait a bit because they are probably overloaded with requests. But if you want to connect directly with them, posting something in the data channel on Slack is a very good idea.
Okay, I'm next. So I just wanted to mention that, I mean, I also had this conversation with Jackie, inspired by Michael, because we have our constant buddy chats. So she shared many dashboards with me that I am now looking at, and I'm trying to understand how to make the best use of that. But we also created a merge request to make a small change in our process. So it's just to ensure that we are also taking into account some known data that we have during our validation tracks. So that's just the beginning in a way for us.
Thanks for sharing that, Vithika. I think that's useful for the long run.
Pedro, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, this is something that I was hoping someone made a presentation, and it's a very important topic for designers to make better decisions. And I think that a lot of product managers use data, but my personal experience is that they're not as interested in the granular usage data as much as we are. And it can provide some clarity on the larger metrics that we usually track, the monthly active users and things like that. So I think it's very timely. Thank you for the presentation, and specifically the work that you did with your team. I think any of the events and clicks that you instrumented are helpful for any group at GitLab, but for me specifically and code review. Thank you for instrumenting and doing the work of instrumenting the top links, especially the issues, MRs, and to-dos, because that will help us improve the way that people find your merge requests. So yeah, this was more of a statement. Mike, one question that I have, and I was starting to write it down in the agenda, was that I'm not entirely sure. I haven't found anything in the handbook, but maybe there is if we are allowed to publicly share screenshots and numbers of the usage data. I don't know. In the past, I used to do that, but with in the past few months, I have tended just to link to the dashboard and say, "Hey, check this," or just give a percentage that doesn't say how many people or how many clicks happen. I don't know if you thought about that, or if you have any information on it.
Very good point, especially with the regulation training and everything like that. Yeah, I'm not too sure myself on that one, so I'll probably need to follow up on that and probably change my notes and comments.
Yeah, and maybe this presentation, because I think you showed some numbers. I'm not sure, but anyway, yeah, I think this is great, and thank you so much for explaining this. And now we know who to nag if we want help with the dashboards.
Yeah, perfect. Nag away, but also the data Slack channel is also a good start.
I also wanted to add that I think there was a mention of specifically this kind of data in the transparency documentation update for the transparency value, perhaps, where there was something about sharing about GitLab to the community, and that this is the kind of sensitive information we should include, but still wouldn't hurt to double check. I used to share it, I think, at some point. So
Well,
I
actually,
didn't know it was that serious.
I'll check the guidelines from now on. I think that's a good heads up. Awesome. Any other questions? Right. Then I'll stop the recording. Thanks, Michael, for the presentation.